The Pentagon hasn't gotten a clean audit yet in its third time through, but it has made improvements. The Pentagon's top financial leader, Thomas Harker, says DOD might not get a totally clean audit until 2027. Asif Khan's director of the Financial Management and Assurance Team at the Government Accountability Office, been tracking this issue for a long time. Asif, welcome, and it's great to continue our conversation on this. What's your takeaway from the results of the third audit at the Defense Department?
First, thank you, Francis. Great to be on the show. I think it's very important for people to realize that this is probably the largest audit in the world. DOD is a huge organization. The agency-wide audit comprises of 25 standalone audits. The audit is overseen by the DOD Inspector General's office, and the individual component audits is performed by the CPA firm. This year, DOD did not receive an opinion. It was a disclaimer of opinion, just like it had been the prior 3 years. So the top-level results have not changed. The individual agencies received a disclaimer of opinion because the auditors were not able to get sufficient reliable evidence to base an opinion on. However, there were a few bright spots. There were 6 smaller components which were able to get an opinion this year, and those were the agencies which did receive an opinion in fiscal year 19. And it's important to recognize because one cannot take an opinion for granted from one year to another year.
One of the numbers that Mr. Harker talked about on the release of these results was the fact that the audit cost $203 million. I was not able to find the old numbers, but I believe I recall that cost going down significantly. $700 million in identified savings or cost avoidance. Those numbers add up to you, no pun intended, Asif?
Yes, I mean, the audit costs have remained somewhat stable over the last 3 years, around $200 million. This is the audit fee. In addition to that, there's also cost involved in the remediation activities. So altogether, this comes up to around $1 billion per year to be able to do that. We analyzed the numbers ourselves, the audit fee itself, and that was very much in line with the Fortune 1000 companies out in the private sector. So that wasn't something that was out of line the prior few years.
Another number that I thought was potentially troubling, maybe it's good news or bad news, I guess, depending how you look at it. Mr. Harker said auditors were able to go to 600 locations last year to perform work. They were only able to go to about 100 this year to perform work because of COVID. Does that make much of a difference in the results that we see, whether auditors are actually able to be on site as opposed to having to work remotely?
Right. I mean, there's only that much the auditors can do without being on site. Having said that, the auditors were able to do a lot more work than would have expected, despite the shutdown itself. So it made somewhat of a difference. Having said that, the overall top-line result, it's pretty much the same as it was last year. Where it may have impacted was the remediation activity. And that's something worth recognizing DOD for, that based on our work, DOD was able to remediate about 26% of the audit findings from the fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 audits. So that is quite an accomplishment. However, our understanding is this year that the work is still ongoing, that it may not be up to the same percentage as it was in the prior year. And that may be because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Could it also be because the department's just continuing to make progress and there are fewer things that they have to repair?
Well, no. As the audits are going to continue, the number of findings is going to increase. Like I'd mentioned, in April of 2019, there were about 2,400 findings and recommendations that the auditors had issued. That number has increased by several hundred. So there are over 3,000 findings and recommendations at this point, and that was to be expected. As these audits progress, more and more areas are going to come under the scope of the audits, and the findings are going to continue to increase. And that's a challenge that DOD is going to face, that they have to continue to be under audit, and to show progress or substantial progress, they will have to remediate a large number of findings that are being reported by the auditors.
All right, the big kahuna here is 2027. That made everybody's eyes bug out. Is that reasonable, that it's going to take, it will be a total by then of 10 years for the department to reach a clean audit opinion department-wide?
It's worth remembering, going back when DoD first started undergoing these audits in 2018, that under the secretary at that point in time, they were very clear that this is going to be a long-term endeavor. The main intention at this point in time is not to be able to obtain an opinion, but use these audits to receive actionable feedback. So DoD has been able to do that. They have been able to sustain this audit for 3 years. That is quite an accomplishment. Getting to an opinion is a long-term endeavor, because some of these findings are going to require quite some time to be able to get down to the root cause. That's what is causing them. Admittedly, some of these findings can be rectified fairly quickly. The others, where it involves a systems change, a process change, are going to require some further analysis, and it's going to take years for them to get into place.
Asif Khan, great insight as always. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Francis.